The night an Australian woman was taken by aliens as her husband watched. The Kelly Cahill encounter. On the night of August 8, 1993, Kelly Cahill and her husband Andrew were driving along Belgrave Hallam Road to visit with some friends. This semi-rural stretch of the road was nearly empty, lined with trees, open paddocks, and scattered farm properties southeast of Melbourne, Australia. While still on the road, they noticed an unusual light in the distance, hovering low against the dark horizon. At the time, it didn't alarm them. The light appeared faint and far away, and neither of them gave it much thought. When they arrived at a friend's house shortly afterward, they mentioned it casually, even laughing about it. The light became a brief point of conversation, something odd but not frightening. No one suggested anything extraordinary. It was dismissed as perhaps an aircraft, a reflection, or simply a trick of the night sky. The couple spent the evening socializing with their friends and left sometime after 11 p.m. They started the familiar drive back to their home in Nair Warren. As they traveled back down Belgrave Hallam Road, the tone of the evening changed. The road grew darker and quieter. The trees closed in, and the light they had earlier joked about was no longer distant. It was now directly ahead of them, hovering, blocking the roadway. What began as a moment of curiosity and even humor would soon become one of Australia's most discussed close encounter cases, transforming an ordinary drive home into an experience that would follow Kelly Cahill for the rest of her life. Nothing about that night suggested it would become one of Australia's most debated UFO encounters. As they drove, Kelly noticed something unusual ahead on the road. At first, it appeared to be a large dark mass hovering just above the pavement, partially obscured by the darkness. Andrew slowed the car, assuming it might be debris or possibly an overturned vehicle. As they approached, the object became clearer and far more unsettling. Hovering silently above the road was a disc-shaped craft, metallic and dark, estimated to be several meters across. It was not emitting a beam, nor did it produce any sound. Instead, it appeared to be absorbing light, its surface matte rather than reflective. Kelly later described the moment as surreal, her mind struggling to reconcile what her eyes were seeing. Then, the encounter escalated. Kelly became aware of figures on the road beneath the object. They were not human. She later described them as short beings, roughly 3 to 4 feet tall, dressed in tight black suits or uniforms, with large heads and pale faces. Their movements were deliberate and controlled. One of the beings appeared to turn and face the vehicle. At that moment, Kelly experienced an overwhelming sensation, panic mixed with paralysis. She screamed for Andrew to keep driving. Andrew accelerated, and as the car sped past the object, Kelly felt a sudden and intense physical reaction. She later described a sensation like being struck internally, followed by disorientation and nausea. The next clear memory either of them had was being farther down the road, several minutes later, with no recollection of how they had traveled that distance. They had lost time. Shaken and confused, the couple drove home in silence, both trying to process what had happened. Kelly felt physically unwell and emotionally distressed. That night, she struggled to sleep, plagued by anxiety and an unshakable sense that the encounter was not yet over. In the days that followed, Kelly began to notice something disturbing. She discovered a triangular mark on her abdomen, consisting of 3 small puncture-like impressions arranged in a precise geometric pattern. The area was tender and unlike any injury she could recall. Medical explanations failed to account for its appearance. Even more troubling were the psychological effects. Kelly experienced recurring nightmares, heightened anxiety, and flashes of imagery she could not place. At times, she felt as though fragments of memory were just out of reach, present but inaccessible. Unlike many cases, Kelly was initially reluctant to speak at all about her encounter. Eventually, she reported the incident to UFO researchers, including members of Victorian UFO Research Society. Her account was documented carefully and consistently over time. Under controlled and professionally supervised conditions, Kelly Cahill later agreed to undergo hypnotic regression, not as definitive proof of what occurred, but as an investigative method to explore potential memory gaps associated with trauma and missing time. During these sessions, Kelly recalled being separated from her husband shortly after the encounter on the road. She described an overwhelming sensation of being unable to move, followed by the impression that her surroundings had changed abruptly. According to her hypnotic testimony, she found herself inside an enclosed space she did not recognize. The interior was described as dim but evenly illuminated, with no visible light sources. The walls appeared smooth and curved, metallic in nature, giving the impression of a sealed, manufactured environment rather than a conventional room. Kelly reported the presence of several non-human entities standing nearby. She described them as short in stature, approximately 3 to 4 feet tall, with thin limbs, large heads, and pale or grayish skin. Their facial features were minimal: small mouths, reduced noses, and large dark eyes that she described as deeply unsettling. She noted the absence of visible emotion or facial expression. The beings did not communicate verbally. Instead, Kelly recalled a sense of directed awareness, as if instructions or intentions were being conveyed without spoken language. She repeatedly emphasized that the entities appeared focused and task-oriented, showing no curiosity, hostility, or compassion, only efficiency. During the session, Kelly described being placed on a flat surface, similar to a bench or table. She recalled a medical-like examination, during which instruments were brought close to her body. Although she could not clearly describe the tools themselves, she reported sensations of pressure and vibration, particularly around her abdomen. She recalled intense fear, but also an unusual sense of restraint, not physical force, but an inability to resist or move. At no point did she recall being physically harmed, but the experience left her with a deep sense of vulnerability. One figure, slightly taller than the others, appeared to observe while the others carried out the procedure. Kelly perceived this entity as being in some form of authority or supervisory role, although she could not explain how she knew this. Her next memory during the regression was of being returned to her surroundings. She recalled a sensation of movement or transition, followed by darkness. When awareness returned, she was once again in the car with her husband, several minutes farther down the road. Researchers involved in the case have emphasized that hypnotic regression is controversial and can introduce suggestions. However, they also noted that Kelly's core account, missing time, the presence of beings, physical markings, and emotional trauma, remained consistent before and after the hypnosis. As with much of the Kelly Cahill case, these hypnotic recollections do not provide proof, but they do add depth to an encounter that remains unexplained, an encounter marked not by spectacle or prophecy, but by silence and control, leaving unanswered questions. Later, one of the most significant developments in her case happened when it was discovered another witness had come forward. Investigators would uncover the account of an independent motorist who had been traveling along the same stretch of road that night. According to his statement, he observed an unusual hovering object in the area at approximately the same time Kelly and Andrew Cahill reported their encounter. The witness described the object as stationary above the roadway, emitting a diffuse light that stood out sharply against the darkness. What made his account particularly significant, however, was not just the presence of the object, but what he claimed to see beneath it. He reported noticing small, dark figures on the roadway, positioned near the vehicle's path. The figures appeared short in stature, moving deliberately rather than erratically. Their size, posture, and placement closely matched Kelly Cahill's description of the being she later claimed to have encountered. It should be noted that this individual had no prior connection to Kelly or Andrew Cahill. He was not part of their social circle, had no involvement with UFO research at the time, and was unaware of their account when he reported what he had seen. His statement was given independently, reducing the likelihood of cross-contamination or shared narrative influence. Despite the potential importance of his testimony, the witness did not pursue publicity and did not remain involved in the case. Like all the others connected to this incident, he withdrew from further discussion, leaving his account as a brief but unresolved point of corroboration. While this report does not confirm the nature of Kelly's encounter, it remains one of the few independent observations that aligns closely with her version of the event, adding yet another layer of uncertainty to a case already defined by partial evidence, missing voices, and unanswered questions. Despite the publicity surrounding the incident, no independent witnesses have stepped forward to publicly support Kelly's account. No additional motorists came forward. No one confirmed seeing the figures on the road or the craft from a distance. As skepticism grew, the attention shifted away from the event itself and toward Kelly as the sole public face of the encounter, and scrutiny would take its toll. Eventually, Kelly stopped providing new information to UFO researchers and investigators. She withdrew from interviews, declined further hypnosis or public discussion, and gradually cut off formal involvement with the UFO research community altogether. According to researchers familiar with the case, she later moved back to the region where the encounter occurred, choosing a life away from public attention. From that point forward, she quietly faded from the public record, leaving the case unresolved and without closure. There was no retraction, no dramatic confession, just silence. Whether that silence reflects exhaustion, fear, disillusionment, or simply a desire to move on remains unknown. What is certain is that the Kelly Cahill case, once one of Australia's most talked about close encounter reports, ended not with answers, but with withdrawal. And in the absence of corroboration, the story remains suspended in that uncomfortable space between belief and disbelief. Documented, investigated, and ultimately unconfirmed. She has not claimed special knowledge, ongoing contact, or cosmic revelation. Her story is not one of chosen messengers or grand warnings. It is instead the account of an ordinary person who believes she encountered something not meant to be seen on an ordinary road on an ordinary night. Multiple people were reportedly in the area that night. Some witnesses initially spoke informally to researchers or media, but none maintained a public presence. No one stood beside Kelly in a sustained or official way, not even her husband. That abrupt withdrawal has raised the question, why? Was it fear of ridicule or media pressure that kept them silent, or something else? Some researchers point out that not all witness silence requires intimidation. Sometimes disbelief alone is enough. Kelly stood alone, withdrawing from the public, eventually disengaging from researchers and the humiliation of public discussion. Some interpret this as a reason why her story could be false. However, to this day, Kelly Cahill has stood by her account, and as with most UFO alien encounters, her withdrawal is equally consistent with emotional exhaustion and loss of support, which could also point toward truth. So, was it an extraterrestrial encounter or a misinterpreted human operation? No definitive explanation has ever been provided. One only has to remember, in the early 1990s, public association with UFO abduction claims often led to professional damage, social ridicule, media harassment, and worst of all, agents in dark suits. This story has all the same hallmarks as most alien encounters. A cover-up. For space, the final frontier above and beyond an open-minded channel, the Kelly Cahill abduction qualifies as one of the most grounded and unsettling close encounter cases on record. Not because it proves anything, but because it refuses to be dismissed. Thank you, Kelly Cahill, for telling your story. You are not alone in this world. If you have enjoyed the story of Kelly Cahill, like and subscribe so you won't miss the next time we go to the final frontier above and beyond.